As I was sitting there, I heard a loud gunshot go off in my head. My first instinct was I thought that I had been shot. I don't feel any blood. I couldn't have been shot. So my next instinct was this has got to be a brain aneurysm. And then it was like lava and lightning going through my skull. And I thought, oh God, this is it. And when I looked around, I was in darkness. And that's whenever the realization hit me. I'm really dead. It seemed like while I was there that I was almost in an invisible box and I was separate from everything. There was a presence that came up over my left shoulder. And he told me right to my mind, you're not here forever. And off in the distance, I saw this purple glow. It looked like a map of brain neurons. And when I saw it, I kind of thought, what was that? Yeah, what is that? And he told me that's the fabric of humanity. And I remember just kind of sitting there and going, wow, this is big. Something amazing has been revealed to me here.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Welcome, everyone, to Higher Journeys. And of course, if it is your first time here, I welcome you. I'm your host, Alexis Brooks, and I'm here with someone that I just had an amazing conversation with, someone I had the pleasure of meeting quite a few months ago at AlienCon. We were both participating. I'm so anxious for you to hear her story. Her name is Mindy Tautfest. She's the author of the book, Dying to Meet Them, One Woman's Incredible Journey from NDE to UAP. Mindy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Alexis. It's great to be here.
I had to really think about where to go, what road to go down with this story, Mindy, because yours is full. And I'm going to have to allow you to tell the story about what led to your NDE and what the NDE entailed. But I want to say this up front for everyone watching. Mindy has gone through an incredible sojourn from life to afterlife, back to life, and has emerged with a thesis that is unlike any I've ever heard. We were just actually talking about Dr. Kenneth Ring. You may know that name, pioneer in near-death research and beyond, who has been a mentor to Mindy. And he himself, if I may say, I'm going to put you on the spot, Mindy, feels that the way you're approaching this work in near-death studies and beyond is maybe unmatched here to this point. So there's a lot to talk about. We're going to get into the idea that this, let's just say, I'm going to tease it, this reality is not at all what we think it is made of and how you came to that conclusion. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you go into your story. I think we should just start right at the beginning. In 2016, you were 36 years old, yes?
Yes, yeah, pretty young still.
Yeah.
Living out on a big 300-acre wheat farm up in northern Oklahoma. We had moved back out there. My father-in-law was having some health problems and having trouble, keeping up with the farm work. And my husband, being a good, strong farm boy, said, "Okay, well, let's move back there and help out Dad." So we had moved back out there, and our children were young. They were elementary age and had kind of settled in. He was working at the local school. He was a teacher and a coach, and he drove the bus. And um, the kids were attending the school there, and he was preaching some on the weekends. We were Southern Baptist, and he had come from Church of Christ, and I had a more Pentecostal background. So the Baptist faith kind of, met us in the middle there. And so we were very religious. We had Bible studies each night with the kids and, said our prayers and attended church faithfully. And I have always had some kind of a interest in paranormal stuff because I've had those kind of encounters all my life.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's what led me to meeting up with my husband. He had reached out to me on MySpace, if you remember.
I do.
and and I said, "Oh, you're a preacher. I have questions for you." At the time, I was having problems with shadow people, and it had shown up when I was 8 and kind of followed me all through my early 20s. And so I didn't understand why I was having that kind of a negative attachment or haunting or whatever you want to, that's a whole nother subject going into the shadow people. But um so I had met up with him that way. And so he knew I always had an interest in these kinds of things. So back on the farm, we're out there. And that morning I woke up, it was actually election day between Hillary and Trump. So, everybody is, the vibes were high that day. I got up and my face was swollen, and I took a picture and sent it to my husband. I said, "Hey, my face is swollen. I don't know what's going on. I'm not hurting, but something's up." And so I took a Benadryl and went and jumped in the shower and figured, give it some time, maybe it'll go down some, because it wasn't too terrible. Just something a little bit abnormal. And when I got out of the shower, it was early afternoon, probably 3, 4 o'clock. And I was waiting for John and the kids to come back home. And I sat there and I was looking up to see if there were any early exit polls coming out.
Mhm.
And as I was sitting there, I heard a loud gunshot go off in my head. And my first instinct was I thought that I had been shot. There had been coyote hunters around that area in the days prior, and I thought, "Oh, crap. They have shot through this flimsy old trailer, and they have shot me in the head." And, your thoughts are going so fast. I'm thinking, "Okay, I don't feel any blood. I couldn't have been shot." So my next instinct was, this has got to be a brain aneurysm.
Hmm.
I had been an ICU nurse by trade, and so I'm trying to go through all my assessment, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And as I'm doing this, I felt what I describe as an electrical avalanche. And it went from my very top of my head, and it kind of rolled off like an onion. It was like a peeling away feeling all the way down to my toes. And then it was like lava and lightning going through my skull.
Hmm.
Incredible, incredible pain. And I felt my head dropping, and I thought, "Oh God, this is it." And so I'm freaking out. My front door's open. My kids are going to run in any moment. And I'm waiting for them to come in and give me hugs and kisses like they always did, and I thought, "Oh God, they're going to come in and they're going to find me dead." And I could not, it broke my heart, and I'm thinking, well, John couldn't handle it either. He's so tenderhearted, God, if I can pull through this, please give me strength to pull through this. I don't want to be a burden on them, but I can't live with the thought of them discovering my body here. Um, and so I was in deep, deep prayer, and in incredible pain. And as I sunk deeper and deeper into prayer, I stopped because it seemed like I had been praying for a long time. And when I looked around, I was in darkness. And I thought, "Okay, this is different." So I never had like a leaving my body. I never hovered over or anything like that. I was just there. I think I was so distraught that I didn't even notice. Um, so when I'm in this darkness, I'm just trying to fill out the environment. I'm trying to figure out, where am I? And so my first instinct was to put my hand in front of my face. And that's what you see on the cover of the book, is that hand in the darkness. And I wanted to see if I could see anything, if it was dark or if it was just nothing there. And so when I put my hand out, I couldn't see it. And so my next instinct was clap my hands, like, because I thought, well, do I have hands? So I started clapping, and I couldn't. And that's whenever the realization hit me. I'm really dead. I'm crossed over. And so I start going through my Christian teaching. What's next? I'm waiting for judgment. I'm waiting for the tunnel of light. I'm waiting for my loved ones to show up. I'm waiting for Jesus. And as I'm waiting, nothing is happening. And I'm trying to go through these different scenarios. I'm waiting, I'm looking around for anything. And I start calling out, hello, hello, and it's nothing. And the longer it takes, the more and more distraught I was getting and more heartbroken, because I'm realizing Jesus isn't coming. Nobody's coming. And so that turns into a self-reflection. What have I done? Why am I here? Am I here by myself forever? And part of the hard thing there was that all I was my emotions. I didn't have anything. I couldn't twiddle my thumbs. I couldn't turn on the TV. I couldn't take anything off of my distress. And I had to feel it completely. Um, so I didn't have a life review like some people, describe. Mine was more of a self-reflection and why have you forsaken me, God? And I'm looking back through events in my life and I'm trying to figure out, what have I done that I didn't make it to heaven? I've been a pastor's wife. I've traveled all over the state of Oklahoma proclaiming the good news. And here I am in the darkness, alone and forsaken. I could not wrap my mind around it. And I'm thinking about my husband and my kids. What are they doing? Have they discovered my body yet? I'm trying to grapple with losing them, um, because now I've been separated from them. It seemed like while I was there that I was almost in an invisible box and I was separate from everything. I could feel God and creation. And I now use the word source, really,
Mhm.
because it wasn't a personification. It had more of an intelligence that spanned all of creation, all of time, everything. And I could feel that immense power all around me.
Can I
But
can
I
I stop?
was,
I'm so sorry. Can I stop just for a moment? At what
yeah,
point, Mindy, you went from feeling alone in this dark box? So was there a transition from that to all of a sudden you felt the source? At what point did that happen?
I became aware of it. I almost felt like a spectacle, that I was separate from everything, yet I was being observed. And I could feel that immense power around me. And that's part of what crushed me so much, was that I was separate from it all. I was separate from everything, from everyone. And how do you even begin to comprehend? What have I done that's so horrible that I can't connect with anything in existence? Um, it was hard. It was very distressing. Distressing is a very good word for it.
Mhm.
Um, and as I was, trying to work through what had happened, what I had done, I came to the realization that I had no problem loving others. That had never been my problem. It was loving myself. And once I realized that, there was a presence that came up over my left shoulder. Um, and I felt him there. I couldn't see him. It was definitely male, but it wasn't Jesus. It wasn't my grandfather. It wasn't anything that I could identify as human or angelic or divine. It was just a presence. It was an entity. And he told me, you know, right to my mind, you're not here forever. And it was instant relief, because I knew someone was there. I knew I wasn't there forever. And it was, I go into the book, it was almost sterile. It wasn't like a kindness. It was a sterile kindness. Let me say that. It wasn't, to comfort me necessarily. It wasn't a warmth, but it was knowledge relayed to me to help relieve my suffering.
Mhm.
So in that, it was a kindness. And it almost felt like he wasn't even supposed to do that, but he
Really?
did. It was kind of hesitant.
Hmm.
but he helped. And whenever he did, then we started soaring off to the left. And off in the distance, I saw this purple glow. It's the only thing I saw while I was over there. And as I got closer and closer to it, I could see these bright pink lines in between it. And where they joined up, it was bright yellow. And it looked like a map of brain neurons. And I've since seen, kind of a comparison between that and the cosmic web. It's
Mhm.
exactly what I saw. And when I saw it, I kind of thought, what was that? What is that? And he told me that's the fabric of humanity. And I remember just kind of sitting there and going, wow, this is big. Something amazing has been revealed to me here. And I could just feel love radiating off of it. And I thought, wow, I wanted to go to it so bad. But he kind of indicated it's not for you. And we continued sailing off to the left. And when we did, I was inserted back in my body. And whenever I came to, I rebooted. It was a hard restart, like a computer starting up.
Mm.
And it was a whoop, kind of feeling.
Right.
And I could hear the TV. It was kind of muffled, and my head was ringing so loud, and I was confused and trying to find my phone to call my father-in-law. And I finally did. I had had a stroke, so I kept falling down. My left or my right arm kept, I'd try to prop up on it, and it would just fall. Um, but I was able to get my phone and call my father-in-law, and he was there within minutes, standing in my living room. And then it was, okay, we've got to get me to a hospital.
Mhm. Talk a little bit about, uh, the aftermath. Well, we're gonna go into the aftermath, of course, but the reaction of the people. You went to the hospital, and what was the treatment there?
Or the
Literally and
non-treatment.
yeah, or non-treatment.
Yeah. Well, we lived, like I said, out on that farm. We were 30 miles from the nearest small town. So we were in the middle of nowhere.
Mhm.
And we went to the little county hospital. And they were so ill-equipped. They did one scan of me. Whenever I arrived, I was still slurring my words, my arm was still limp. It was obvious I was having stroke symptoms. But in the time that I was there over those few hours, it started kind of resolving. And so by the time they got the scan done and everything, they said, well, maybe your neck shifted and you pinched a nerve. And I thought, no, something really, really dramatic happened here. You're missing something. And they said, well, we don't see anything indicated on the scan. So we're going to go ahead and send you home. Come back if you have any more problems. And so the next morning I got up. I had another stroke,
You had
called a
another.
friend from church, and she took me in, and they treated me like I was a drug seeker. Being a nurse, I knew what they were kind of putting
You knew
towards
the
me.
language, you knew the yeah.
I did. And they had called my neurologist, and he said, that she has these types of migraines that look like strokes. And it was so ridiculous because I at that time I couldn't even tell them, I literally went to the other side. I'm trying to deal with my failing physical health. I can't even begin to address the mental and spiritual aspects.
Right.
And this went on for 2 years that
2 years.
they kept sending me home, and, the specialists would not look into it further. And finally, I told my husband, "I'm going to die. If this happens again, it will kill me. We've got to get some help," because I was still passing out every day. My head was still on fire. That lava feeling, which I know now is, um, uh, they call it the suicide disease because it's so horribly painful, which was an after effect of that vertebral artery dissection I had. Um, and I'll get into that. That's when we moved out here to Oklahoma City within 2 weeks. And here's some divine intervention for you. Um, we bought a new house here in the city, and we moved in, and we didn't have our cable, and DVR and all that hooked up yet. So we had a little Roku stick, and the Roku, they have like little 30-second commercials you have to watch. Every single one was for Integris Baptist Hospital that's here in Oklahoma City. And it was like heroes of the hospital, you know? And so I'm watching, and I caught the tail end of one, and I said, "Oh, I want to see this," because it was a young 30 something blonde nurse
Hmm.
who had something happen. I said, "Oh, I want to see what happened to her." And which was out of the ordinary, because there for those first 2 years, I couldn't even watch a medical episode on TV. I had such
Hmm.
severe PTSD. It sent me into a panic. Um, but anyway, so I finally caught the commercial the next time it came on, and the girl said, "I was a nurse, and I was, getting up and getting ready, and I got in the shower, and I heard a loud pop, and then I fell to the floor, and my arm went limp." And I'm like,
Oh my
"Oh my
goodness.
God, John." I said,
Okay,
"Look
that's
this up."
that's beyond, certainly beyond coincidence. Let's pause on that for a minute, Mindy, because particularly now as a researcher, and when I say researcher, she's deep into it. How would you frame what that was beyond, even beyond
I
synchronicity? Could that have been an aspect of you were seeing?
That's interesting. I've just always looked at it as, divine guidance.
That too. That
I
too.
was sent back here for a purpose. And to get to that purpose, I had to go through these steps, this whole journey to get me where I am today. And I believe that I was supposed to go over to the other side. I believe I was supposed to go to the void specifically. I believe that I needed to go through each of these things to get me where I'm going. And I can't be happier today than
I know.
I'm living my dream now, you know?
I think
But
this is a good time. You know what I want to do, everyone? I'm going to play a clip for you. Mindy was kind enough to give me this clip and some research that I was doing for a workshop that I actually just gave yesterday and re-gave it, and also have given it live. So I want to play this for you, have a comment about that, but then we're going to go back in time because I want to get more into your NDE experience and who you may have shared some of your story with. But let's watch this first.
okay.
So, being a near death experiencer and a researcher of UFO phenomena, I found that a lot of times that these kind of encounters can be very, very frightening. My personal encounter was in a place of darkness, and I didn't end up having a heavenly type scenario. So, I lived with a lot of fear for several years following that. But in time came understanding and acceptance, and it allowed me to see much more of the bigger picture. And it gave my life so much more meaning, knowing that I'm part of something that is so big and so grand, and that we are here for a reason, and we are to love each other. We are connected to one another. And that's really our purpose for being here. So, whereas I wasn't living my life to my fullest purpose before, these kind of encounters actually kind of springboarded me up into what I'm doing now in working with other experiencers. I think that people that have these type of encounters are sometimes the best people to, talk with and to share your encounters with, because we understand. We all come from different places, and we're all at different parts, and at different parts of our path. And in talking to one another, we can come together and we can share ideas, and we can start understanding the reason behind some of these different types of encounters that we have. So, you might come in initially with fear, but eventually, most of the time, these things turn out to be a wonderful blessing in disguise, because they really open our eyes to what really is out there and our full purpose.
A blessing in disguise, indeed, Mindy. A blessing in disguise. I want to talk a little bit now about, and I had the pleasure of kind of power reading through in preparation for our interview. I'm definitely reading the whole book as soon as I get my hard copy. But you tell an interesting story about someone that you needed to leave home for a while. There were a number of sort of transitions you had to make on your journey back to healing, and I think
Yeah.
you were spending time. I don't know if it was a friend or who that person was, but in that period of time that you were spending with her, you talk about how you would almost go into an altered state, and she said you were telling her snippets of the experience that you had. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was what before we moved to the city. It was right after. She was actually the one that drove me to the hospital when I was having that second stroke. Um, and she lived there in town, and she had offered, if you want to be with someone during the day, I'm home all day. Why don't you come stay with me until they get this figured out? So that first month, God, I can't even, it was so hard to leave my husband and my kids while I'm dealing with all of this. My husband is distraught, doesn't know what's going on with me. And I moved in with a church friend, and I had only met her like 3 times. I didn't even know her that well. She was just this amazing human being who showed such compassion for me and for what was going on. Um, God, and she's one of my most highly prized friends now,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
we've been through so much together now. But I would sit up. I moved in for that first month, and we went back and forth to the hospital sometimes, and they'd send me home again, and she was there through me passing out and having these horrible episodes and having PTSD reactions, um, and a lot of that time I have, mentally blocked out. Um, in speaking with her later, she was the one that she said, you were sharing things with me. And I have little snippets of sitting up on the couch. I was having terrible nightmares. I don't remember that. I guess yelling out and I couldn't sleep. And um, so she would get up and we'd sit up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and, and watch these silly TV shows together, just and she would just be with me. And she said that I would stop sometimes. I would sit there, we'd be watching TV and I would have the remote. She would let me, control it, just whatever my brain needed. And I would pause it and I would turn to her and I would just start talking about the other side or talking about, you know, um, just different aspects of it, trying to process what I had been through. And so she had gotten a pretty good idea of what had happened, just from these snippets that I was sharing with her at that time. But I didn't even remember sharing it
Mm.
because in my memory, I didn't talk about it at all for those first 2 years. Uh, I struggled so hard with being able to share that aspect of my encounter with my husband because we had talked about these things before. We didn't think that near death experiences were real. We thought they were a trick of the mind and this and that, and because we
Even
were
with you,
very
I'm sorry, even with your prior encounters with the non-human realm?
well, I'll tell you, I was more on the accepting side. He was more fundamentalist, and we would
Mhm.
discuss. He's very persuasive. He was part of the debate team all through high school and college, went
Mhm.
to college on a debate scholarship. Um, and so I could see his point of view. But so we were leaning more towards, maybe, man is only supposed to die once. Um, and so to bring that to him and say, I had this type of encounter, it's real. And then to have to say, I didn't go to heaven and Jesus didn't show up.
Mm.
Those are heavy things to try to put on someone that you love. And so I held it in and held it in. I went through PTSD counseling, and that was another divine intervention where it happened to be a teacher at his school had gotten her counseling degree and was looking into PTSD and different treatments. And then we were completely broke. And she said, I'll come over each Tuesday on my lunch break. And she would drive from her lunch break. I still wasn't driving. I was scared to drive and pass out and everything. So she would drive to our house every Tuesday and we would have an hour session for free.
Wow.
And that beautiful woman helped me through all of these different stages of the physical. You know, the kids would drop a cup and I would freak out, you know, and I'm 90% deaf. I lost 90% of my hearing from the aneurysm. And she helped me kind of reel that in and be able to live life. I couldn't even go to church. The flashing lights and the bands, and
Sure.
that's when church stopped for me. After that, I couldn't go back in. And I couldn't go to rock concerts and stuff, and I still can't. Just
Complete
having those
change.
heightened senses that we return with, it's overwhelming. And I've been able to, kind of incorporate that now. But getting back to telling my husband, I was going through that counseling, and then the pandemic hit. And I had just texted her and said, next session, I want to talk to you about something different. I was ready to talk about the near-death experience and start trying to pull that apart. And then we couldn't meet. And that was kind of before Zoom had kind of taken it, a step forward. So I was waiting, and after a couple weeks, I finally just couldn't hold it anymore. And I told my husband, look, I died that day, and this is what I encountered. I was so scared, not because of his reaction. I was scared of just destroying all of his beliefs in one go. Most people that have near-death experiences, 80% or so or more, end in divorce because people change so much. And my husband, and you'll meet him one of these days.
I hope so.
He is such a dear, dear man that he said, no, we'll figure this out together. He didn't even doubt me one bit because he saw the terror in my eyes. The first time that I sat and talked about it, it was ugly crying for hours. And I remember my kids were sitting on the couch and they're looking with their jaws open, what does all this mean? And so it really, that time of the pandemic gave us time to take a step back as a family and look through these things and dive in and really assess what is the deeper meaning here. And my husband actually is the one that found IONS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies.
Right.
And he signed us up. Let's go to a meeting.
Oh, wow. Isn't that amazing? Well,
Yeah.
Mindy, at this point, you said something that triggered where I think I'd like to take this conversation, excuse me, and where I think the audience, I know they're finding the whole story fascinating, but even more so, I want to now go into what you were able to pull out of, and this I'm sure has taken years still of searching, but the impression that what you witnessed left you with, having to do with the possibility of a matrix-like reality that we are living in. I really want to spend some time on this because, guys, you got to read this book. We have an announcement about that in a minute, but excuse me, you brought some very powerful concepts, not necessarily original, but the way you arrived at them is indeed powerful. Let's get into that right now. If you're enjoying this episode, along with all of the subjects that we cover here on Higher Journeys, then I invite you to join our members-only community on Patreon, where we go even deeper into the conversations with the guests that you know and love. Not only does your membership ensure that we can keep this work going and growing, but you'll also get immediate access to our exclusive after shows, get up close and personal with the guests of the show, along with many other member perks. So click on the link below to join now, or visit higherjourneys.com where you'll find the Patreon link. We'll see you on the journey. Thanks. I want to read a quote from your book. You say, "The avatar which I donned in order to regain my life here was able to be mended through code manipulation. But using using the combined will of consciousness through practices such as prayer, meditation, and manifestation." But the fact that you use these terms, avatar, code manipulation, you know, this sort of stunning perception that you had in the years following the experience, in which you started really looking into the idea of an encoded reality made up of zeros and ones. At what point did that dawn on you, and where did you go with it? Let's talk about this for a while.
Okay. That it didn't dawn on me. It was instant. Whenever I returned, it was an instant reboot. And I had to look into being a nurse. Was this derealization? Because I had such a mental disconnect trying to reinsert myself back into this life. I now knew the reality of the void. I knew our true existence. I felt it. I was there. I felt the expanded consciousness that I had over there and the true sense of our being. And I discuss in the book, it's almost like putting on a virtual reality headset
Mm-hmm.
and then being locked into it. If you thought, oh, well, let me try this on, let me go visit this little community, in my virtual reality, and then you couldn't leave. And you had this memory of your husband and your kids and your job and your friends and your life in the other reality. That's what I came back with. I came back with that knowledge of this other reality, which was our true form. And now I'm forced to live in this simulation. And I was so happy to be back and to have my life. Don't get me wrong. I was happy to be back here and to have that opportunity to live out the rest of my life here with my husband and kids and, family and friends. But there was still that disconnect of trying to reconcile my existence here with what I know to be our true existence, and that connection between everything. And it's not here. There's such separation here. We are horrible to each other. There's goodness within humanity, but we're all living our individual lives,
Mm-hmm.
and we're absorbed in our own lives and the things that we're doing. And we forget that connection. Part of the near death phenomena is the life review. And Dr. Kenneth Ring, who I write about quite a bit in my book, he influenced a lot of my research as far as the connections between UFO experiencers and near death experiencers. But he speaks of the golden rule, which comes from the life review process. And people that go through that, they say that they experience their life from the viewpoint of the other person. So say you get in a fight and you punch someone out, you feel that punch.
Mm-hmm.
You feel it from their perspective. And you can never forget that. These people return and they know the ramifications of their actions. And so how can you treat others horribly? You think twice before you say that bad thing to them or you hurt someone's feelings. In fact, you change to where you go out of your way to let each person know just how incredible they are and how much you're happy that they're here,
Absolutely. Yes.
because you remember that connection.
Right.
So this isn't just, unique to me coming back with that connection.
And yet
Others
you
that
weren't
have been over there.
and yet you weren't given the life review as it's described, which is interesting. So I mean, let me ask you this, because you're obviously well read now in the near death research as well as UFO UAP. By the way, Mindy is really, really entrenched in work with MUFON. I want to talk about that before we close out in Oklahoma. But in terms of the research of NDEs that have in the aspects that you're finding tend to be common, is the life review a part of it or no?
Yeah, it's normally pretty common. Like I said, mine was kind of different. It was more of a self-reflection,
Right.
but
Okay. There it
many
is.
near-death experiencers do have the life review. And while I didn't have that, I still felt that connection. I
Mhm.
saw the fabric of humanity. And I even go into in my book that I believe that it's bilocational. It resides there, but it resides here too, in
Mhm.
this invisible web between all of us. So really what we do affects other people. It affects the whole. And we've got to get away from these divisions, needless divisions and
Mhm.
hatred for no reason. Some of these orthodoxies from the different religions that have perpetuated violence, we've got to let it go.
Right.
And I think that when people get over there, they'll see, there's great truths in the world's religions. There's absolutely foundational truths. I would guess I would call myself an omnist now because I do see truth in all of them. But I also see some man-made stuff injected there
No
that
question.
has
Yeah.
that has continued the divisions.
Mhm.
And you got to wonder where that comes from. What orchestrated those divisions?
Well,
Um,
that leads us down the road. I want to stick with this idea of how you so brilliantly wove in a scientific or even quasi-scientific approach to what you saw, bringing in this idea of a possible simulation, literally with binary code involved.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
For that question, let's bring in this possibility. Who's creating the code if this is the case? And could whoever or whatever is creating the code also be inserting these division programs, if you will?
Well, I that's a loaded question. There's
Perfect.
several parts to it.
Sorry.
Um, and I don't want to get deep into religion, but I've been listening, I told you, to Billy Carson lately, and Paul Wallace has done an amazing job of going back and looking at some of the root words found in the Hebrew language that was
Mhm.
translated into the Old Testament. And so it really lines up there. It had that ring of truth to me, and it's something I've been searching for the last 7, 8 years, that I have been trying to reconcile my religious beliefs with, you know, the tales that have been passed down throughout thousands of generations,
Mhm.
hundreds of generations, thousands of years. And then we find these tales all over the world. Uh, and that really, some of their work has really brought things together for me.
Mhm.
So I'd like to, encourage people to go and hear them out. Both of them are very, very brilliant men. Um, I think that there is a connection between the UFO and near death phenomena, and it resides within consciousness. That consciousness transcends into that source reality where I was. And I think that some of these UAP, and this isn't speaking, you had mentioned I was with MUFON. MUFON doesn't take a stance on this, but Mindy Tautfest does. So I have to give that little disclaimer there. But I believe that these UAP are coming from a race that has maintained that conscious connection with the source. And so they are presenting interdimensionally and physically. They're able to travel those great distances, but they're also able to manipulate our reality. And through different code insertions, they're able to pop in and pop out of our reality. They're able to stand at the foot of someone's bed and then
Code
take them to a
insertions. I'm sorry, I have to stop you because you're giving us so much. Code insertions. Please explain when you say code insertions that they may be using that to come and go in our reality. What are
like
code insertions?
I'm not smart enough to even begin. Maybe
You have an
Billy
idea.
Carson could tell us more, but somehow they have technology well beyond. And I believe we were created here as a race with minimal consciousness connection to that source. We have memory of it. We have a longing for it. It's built into us. But I think that they've maintained much more intelligence about that source. And so they're able to, whether it's technologically or consciously, manipulate some of the energy fields here to be able to pop into our reality. One of the things Billy Carson talks about is Thoth being able to transfer his consciousness between the different avatars.
Mhm.
And I absolutely believe that they've maintained that ability, much like I was inserted back into my avatar. And it caught my attention because here he used that same language of, inserting into the avatars. So they could absolutely build some kind of an entity. We've heard that the Greys are a biological created drone almost.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so it makes sense that they could create some kind of biological entity and control it via consciousness or remotely, like much like we do with our drones.
I'm fascinated with the weaving in or the inference of numbers playing a role, coding of numbers, UAP, UFO encounters, broadly speaking, how people are seeing coded numbers. Well, we could call them coded numbers, whether they're repeating numbers, number patterns, frequently now more than ever. I have to have you speak on this. And guys, we're not just talking about 1111. Now, obviously, I've actually incorporated some of what I feel 11 may represent in a lecture or two of mine, but I'm just intrigued by there's something deeper going on, and could it be connected to what you're touching on here? Living in a simulated reality and these advanced entities understanding that connection, having maintained that consciousness connection, are able to utilize the reconfiguration of numbers to come in and out. But in the process, more and more normal people on terra firma, as I always say, are starting to glimpse these numbers. Could there be a connection with why so many people are seeing these repeating numbers right now?
Well, I mean, what better way than to quite literally put numbers in front of you? It makes you think of like the double slit experiment and the observer effect,
Yeah.
where, and I go into this in my book. This is some of what the US government was doing back in '83 with analysis and assessment of the gateway process, where they were trying to send psychic spies literally over into the absolute to make contact with entities there and gather information. And I'm sure that's probably still ongoing, but we know that the government was even looking into the connections between that other side and our physical reality. So I think that using numbers quite literally for us to be able to observe, you have the observer there, and from that other side to be able to send information um, to experiencers via actual numbers, to guide them on paths. That's a quite literal, easy way of communication.
Mhm.
I know
Mhm.
that we have consciousness-based communication, telepathy. Um, People get downloads. I think that this is a very easy way to send information on a wide scale.
Mhm. That's very profound. I don't know that we'll ever know, Mindy, what's behind this barrage of numbers with so many people.
Yeah.
It'd be tempting to say that the people, by and large, that are seeing these numbers on a regular basis have somehow linked up with a broader level of reality. But I can't speak for everyone that's seen numbers. It could be someone that is not even remotely interested, has not had any experience, but I don't know. Something's happening here. Something is absolutely happening. Do you believe there's going to be an eventual and maybe in the short term revelation of what you glimpsed that many more people will see and understand? Do you think something's coming in terms of an
I'm
understanding?
hopeful. I'm hopeful. I have this dissonance in my mind because of my religious upbringing, and of course, you're looking towards the apocalypse and everything.
Right.
On the other side, you're hopeful that we can go another way. And I think that sometimes there are these interruptions within human history to get us back on that path. One of the things that Kenneth Ring heavily believed was that these kind of encounters, these UFO encounters, the near death experiences, that they're almost like a shamanistic journey. And they happen to different people to keep humanity on track, to just remind us, keep loving each other. It's very simple. You're all
Okay.
connected. Love each other. It's a very simple message, But I don't know if humanity will ever catch on. I'm so hopeful.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
as long as we keep having people coming forward and
So important.
opening up and sharing these kind of encounters, um, the evidence becomes more and more hard to deny that there is a source reality and that we are so much more than we realize, than we've been led to believe. And I think that that's probably one of the things that we need to break through is this kind of controlling mindset, where we've allowed ourselves to remain slaves. Let's
Right.
stop and what if we started helping each other?
So
What if
easy.
we just started loving each other?
Could that be the
Um,
key to unlocking the matrix? I mean, you refer to this source
absolutely.
reality. It is very interesting. Because of the upbringing that you've had that has been instilled in you, where you used very fundamental terms like Jesus, Lord, God, do you find yourself not using that as much anymore and referring to source or source reality? You
I
do.
do. I do. And like I had mentioned, Paul Wallace and his work, it has made a profound impact on me because it really kind of solidified. I've been searching. I mean, I'm not even going to lie. For the last 8 years, I've been searching,
Mhm.
where does my religious belief lie? What does all this information mean in light of what I've believed before? Um, Number one, I have a higher reverence for God than I ever did before. I could never deny him. Jesus, I believe, plays a huge role. One of the things that Paul Wallace points out is the difference between Old Testament little g God, who
Mhm.
identified as Yahweh, versus what Jesus said. And Jesus rebuked a lot of he what the Old Testament God was saying.
Mhm.
He said, "You heard Moses said this, but I tell you this."
Right.
And he
Mm,
actually told stories that repudiated some of the things found in the Old Testament. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
he approaches it more from a mindset that these are retellings of some of the ancient Sumerian tablets, that record our true history with ET visits. And they were mistranslated and in the 7th century as Yahweh. Um, and even the Catholic Church, I guess, has come out now and said, do not use Yahweh's name in Christian worship. I think that they've caught on to the fact that the Old Testament's very different than what we have believed. And now that we've had that ability to go back and translate these tablets, it's only been within the last 100 years or so that we've been able to look at these tablets and translate them and know, okay, these are telling the same story. Maybe things were not transcribed exactly as they were. So it gives me a whole new look at religion. I think that it makes perfect sense the way that it's presented by the Bible scholars such as Wallace. Um,
Hmm.
it separates it out because I can never reconcile a jealous and vengeful God
Right. And
with
fire and
who I
brimstone.
met.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. We've been visited for thousands of years by these entities, and they're still visiting people today. And I think that's why we see such a similarity between near-death experiencers and UAP experiencers. In the after effects, we have been touched by something otherworldly that we can never deny, and it changes your mindset forever.
Absolutely. One of the things you bring up in your book in terms of the correlation or connection between NDEs, perhaps OBEs as well, and UFO encounters is something you call information download, something that so many people talk about in so many different encounters, including spiritual awakenings, transformative or peak experiences like yours truly had in 2005. Information download, and not just one, but a stream of information for me that
Right.
lasted 3.5 months nearly, 24/7. That's another story for another time. But commonalities. Let's touch on that before we close out. And by the way, before we do that, I want to say, yes, we are going to have a special event this time on Patreon. We're not going to the after show today because we've got. I'm going to bring it up right now because it's all connected. You all are going to want to read this book. I'm talking to the patrons as well as those that may consider becoming patrons. Here's what we're going to do this time. Mindy has been kind enough to offer her entire book in PDF for members of our Patreon Tier 2 community to read. And then we're going to come together and have a talk with Mindy live.
Yay.
We'll have more details about it, but and maybe I can put a little bit more in the show notes. But in lieu of an after show, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create an event out of this because I guarantee you, once you get yourself into this book, page turner is an understatement. But there are going to be a lot of things, Mindy, for us to want to discuss, and our audience is so prolific in their own search. This will be an amazing conversation. So I just wanted to put that in there. Of course, we'll have a link to Mindy's book, but jump on board with us on Patreon. And, we have these special treats every once in a while, and I'm so glad Mindy's agreed. So,
Oh, I can't
uh,
wait.
oh, it's going to be fun. You just got so much. Where do we end here? I want to touch on shadow people for you, things that were happening to you in the beginning. I don't know. We don't have too much time to go into it, but in retrospect, Mindy, given all that you've gone through, all that you've gleaned, all that you've been privy to see post this event, this NDE, have you looked at the shadow being, what you called shadow being, I'm very familiar with it, encounters, and connected some correlation as to Mindy's path here? Did
Right.
this journey really start way back then?
Absolutely. Well, and I go into the book, again, I bring up Kenneth Ring. His research was really the turning point for me whenever I discovered the Omega Project. Um, he put together a college battery where they interviewed UFO research or UFO experiencers and near-death experiencers. He had always
Mhm.
just looked into the near-death side of things, but one of his colleagues said, "You've got to read Communion." And whenever he did, he said, "Okay, I see there's some kind of similarity here." One of the things that he found out of this big study was that there was an encounter-prone personality and that there was a set of general after effects. And we've talked about some of the after effects. The encounter prone personality tends to be someone who may have had some kind of childhood trauma, or they were born naturally inclined, or they had a parent that kind of fostered this kind of thinking in them, where they were able to learn how to and dissociate to the point where they excluded their environment, basically being able to go into states of deep meditation. Um, I learned how to do it. I remember as a child, just from the pain from my physical ailments. And, my genetic condition caused dislocations all the time and everything. So I learned how to, and we didn't know, it was more like, back in the 70s and 80s, suck it up. So,
You were
you're,
disassociating. You were disassociating.
I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of learning how to dissociate and reach into these other realms that enabled people to be able to do this. Um, so that's one of the main commonalities that we find. And I think that that has played a huge part in my life and all of my encounters with the shadow people and prophetic kind of dreams and different things, ghosts, spirit encounters. All of these things are a result of that ability that I learned as a child. I taught myself, to be able to escape the physical pain. And it put my brainwave somewhere else. But I think that it's been used as part of, kind of the hero's journey where you overcome and
Mhm.
overcome and overcome in order to reach the final reward. And what that reward is, I don't know, but I know since I have been living my purpose, since my return, I'm living my dream. I have always wanted to be involved in UFO research. I used to watch, sightings and stuff as a kid. I was 5, 6 years old. I wouldn't watch Sesame Street. I wanted to watch sightings and unsolved mysteries and, watch the UFO stuff. Even though I wasn't an experiencer of that phenomena, I have always been so taken with it,
That
and
you know of.
fascinated.
That you know
Yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah. But I have always been so taken with that, and where that takes your mind, to be able to expand it to these different realms. Um, so being able to be involved with MUFON now, I'm now the director of training nationally. I'm no longer the Oklahoma State director, so I've been promoted. Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, and I've had so many cool opportunities meeting you out there at Alien Con and just all of your colleagues. Dream come true is an
Wow.
understatement. So, thank you so much for having me here and letting me
Oh, my
talk with you.
dear.
And
Oh, my dear. Well, you are a treat indeed, and someone that I want everyone to get to know. I said to Mindy off camera, please do let me know anything that I can do to make your journey even more fulfilling, just a little bit, just exposing you to first time to my audience, and we'd love to have you back. It's just, when you think of the human journey, that has so many bumps can have so many bumps and bruises along the way physically as well as mentally and emotionally. Think of the amount of people that, for whatever reason, may never glimpse what that journey was all about until after the fact. You have been through those bumps and bruises times 10 to bring you almost full circle back here on planet Earth to realize a dream. That is so powerful.
yeah, I wish we
And
could all just learn to live our purpose. That really is it. Love others, live your purpose. We're here for a reason. And a lot of that is to overcome and to remember our connections, remember to love each other and serve your purpose. I mean, we all have something to be doing here on earth. That's why we're here.
absolutely. I think we're gonna leave it there, journeyers. We'll have Mindy back for sure. Mindy, where can people find you? I know they can get the book on Amazon, right? Of course.
Yes, they
Um,
can find me on my website, mindytautfest.com. I have a link to the book there and some of my UFO research with the Hayden Hughes files. I now own the International UFO Bureau and curator of it. And also on the page for my book, there is a music playlist, and I would encourage people to go in and listen to some of those songs because those were ones that spoke to me so deeply during
oh,
my journey. So it kind of sets the tone and for those that connect musically, it'll speak to them.
I love it. Oh boy. I was had to finish up preparing for our interview today, and I saw something. I think that was the list that I saw, and I'm like, I've got to get back to this. I'm gonna go do that. right now,
Okay.
very soon. Listen, again, no after show, but wouldn't it be cool to come on over to Patreon, come be a part of our community and get involved in something like this? We're going to have a meeting with Mindy and you'll get the free book so you can study up before we meet up. Please consider it. Mindy, you are a treasure. I don't want you to hang up. We're going to do a proper goodbye, but I am going to sign off with the beautiful audience for now. Please, dear ones, love one another. I think the most fundamental is the most powerful message. Continue to love. Love is going, if there is a matrix, that can break the matrix and give us a view into how spectacular we are all connected, how we are all connected. So, with that, I will say thank you as always for tuning into Higher Journeys, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Mindy.
Bye.
Bye.